The craziness of the NFL offseason is almost upon us. We are less than a week away from the beginning of free agency. So Ty and I are going to go through all the potential, or not, I shouldn't say potential, all the free agents for 2024 and tell you where we want them to go from a fantasy perspective, but also predict their landing spot coming up. I want to welcome you to another episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast. Like I said, my name is Cameron Lawrence, and I am joined by my esteemed colleague, Mr. Tyler Plath. Tyler, this is one of your busiest times. You're our draft guru. You've been cranking out mocks left and right. How you feeling with draft time coming up?
Oh, dude, there's nothing quite like draft time, with Senior Bowls and Shrine Bowls. And then you've got the combine that just happened this past weekend. Now we're getting into free agency, and we are really going to see what direction teams will want to go in the draft, right? There's been so many reports for quarterbacks in the top 10, potentially. This is just kind of smokescreen season at its finest. And I eat it all up because there's nothing quite like it.
Yeah, you bring that up, and we have guys like, remember, Malik Willis. People were talking maybe he's going to be a top 4 pick, and he went in the 3rd round. Will Levis falling outside the 1st round last year. So there's smoke screens going everywhere. But before we want to jump in, I'm remiss if I didn't say, make sure you hit that follow button. Make sure you turn on those notifications because we got content coming out all the time. I just did a combine recap. Ty put out a couple shorts on the combine. We got a couple more shorts coming out this week. We got tons of content for you guys. So you do not want to miss out. Hit that subscribe button, turn on those notifications. But Ty, let's not waste any more time and let's jump right into it. Alrighty, we're going to start with quarterbacks because honestly, most teams think they're the most important. So we're going to start with them. And we're going to start with the oldest guy that we're going to talk about all day long. And that is Mr. Kirk Cousins at age 36, coming off an Achilles tear. Yet honestly, he might be the most sought after free agent on the NFL market right now. Chris Jones probably is slightly ahead of him, but Kirk's right up there battling out for that top spot. Last year in 8 games, Kirk 216 for 311, 2,331 yards, 18 tutties and only 5 picks, QB 5 in points per game. Justin Jefferson was going nuts with him last year. Jordan Addison was bursting on the scene. TJ Hawkinson was involved, and they were doing all of it with a mediocre at best run game. I think we could say below average run game. And then, of course, he tore his Achilles. It sounds like he's doing better. We've seen, the Aaron Rodgers seems to be doing better. J.K. Dobbins running on his Achilles right now. But obviously, that's going to be a big question mark going into this season, going into age 36 season. So, Ty, why don't you start us off? Where do you want Kirk Cousins to go this offseason?
I want him to go back to Minnesota, and it's probably the most boring answer, right? With as many teams that could use his services, right? You look at New England, look at Pittsburgh, you look at Minnesota, Chicago, not Chicago, Atlanta. Like, I just want to go back to Minnesota. The hometown bias is kind of seeping through just a little bit, but he was playing so well. And it sucked because the rest of the team really wasn't helping him out at all, right? With a bunch of turnovers, like you said, a mediocre at best run game, a defense that really took a while to kind of get going. So his best performances really did not come through because it all resulted in a loss.
Yeah.
I just bring him back. Yeah. That's just the easy answer.
I agree. And it's, especially when you think about it from a fantasy perspective, right? Justin Jefferson, I think he's going to be our consensus wide receiver 1 this year, especially if Kirk's back. Jordan Addison can be finding his way, top 24 this season. When, obviously Hawk's not going to get back till later in the season, but when he does come back, he's a top, tight end. So all these guys, but it doesn't matter where we want him to go. Ty, where do you think Kirk Cousins ends up this season?
The Atlanta Falcons, and I hate it. But everything that I have seen so far in this offseason is that Atlanta is going to do whatever it takes to go get a franchise quarterback. And I think it's going to be kind of tough for them in the draft where they have a lot of other needs. There's no guarantee that there's going to be a Jaden Daniels, JJ McCarthy, even because he's closer to the top three than he is to the bottom two of the big six name quarterbacks. Just I'm just spitting out what everyone's saying. That's all I'm saying. But I don't it's going to take a lot for Atlanta to go up and get one of those guys.
Yeah.
And I don't think, again, with the roster that they have, they need to kind of keep the capital and continue building out their team on the defensive side, maybe adding a weapon to maybe day two or something like that. So with their cap space and Arthur Blank, owner of the Falcons, pretty much telling their front office, go get whoever. Money is not an object. We will give you a blank check.
Mm-hmm.
I can totally see him going out and just saying, "Hey, Kirk Cousins, here's 45 million a year for the
Yeah.
next 3 years." And this is the other thing that isn't talked about enough. We've talked long enough about Kirk already, but he's wanting a long-term contract somewhere.
Yeah.
Is Minnesota really going to want to give him a long-term contract? I don't think so. I think it's 2 years at most. You know where he is going to go get a long-term contract though? It's Atlanta.
Yeah.
Because they are ready to go now. So that's my prediction. I don't like it, but that's just where things seem to be heading at this moment.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear everything that you're saying, but I think he's still a Viking at the end of the day.
Yes.
I think they bring him back. I think it's probably a 2-year deal. Gives him flexibility moving forward. But I do think that he is a Viking at the end of the day. All right, let's move on to our next quarterback, Mr. Baker Mayfield. He will be 28 this season, which feels weird. It feels like he should be younger and older at the same time.
Right.
Baker this season, 364 attempts or completions on 566 yards, 4,044 yards, 28 touchdowns, and 10 picks. I mean, if you would have told me that this was Baker's stat line at the beginning of the year, I would have been very, very impressed. And I was impressed with him on this season. I think he outplayed a lot of people's expectations. And I think he's played himself into probably a decent contract coming up here this offseason. He was the quarterback 10 in fantasy points last season. Obviously, he's in Tampa right now. Sounds like he wants to go back to Tampa. That's my prediction. I'm going to say that's my prediction and my want is that he's back in Tampa. I'm just going to jump the gun on it. They just re-signed Mike Evans. Breaking news, if you haven't heard, to a 2-year, $52 million contract, which is just ridiculous. But good for Mike Evans, good for the Tampa Bay. So I think they bring back Baker unless they really think they can go get someone better. Because I don't think you bring Mike Evans back on a contract like that without the quarterback.
Yep. No, that's exactly it. I'm in the same boat as you. That's my prediction, and that's what I want to happen. Again, there's a similar market for Baker as there will be for Kirk because of teams that, the media, including us, we can just look at depth charts and go, they could use the upgrade there. I think at the end of the day, both Tampa and Baker want to come to an agreement and ultimately partner up for the next 3-4 years. And I wouldn't blame either side for wanting to do that because it seems like that's the perfect match.
Yeah. And so then that leaves our last guy. He's not really a free agent, but let's be honest, he's not going to be a Bear this time next year. And that is Justin Fields. He'll be 25 this year. In 13 games last year, 227 completions on 370 pass attempts for 2,562 yards, 16 touchdowns, 9 picks. He also added 124 attempts on the ground for 657 yards and four touchdowns. He was QB 9 on the season. Now he's an interesting one, right? Like I said, he's not a free agent, but I think at this point it's getting pretty clear the Bears are going with Caleb Williams at the number 1 overall pick. That's kind of what we've thought they were going to do all year, which will make it interesting from a trade perspective because teams know they don't want to hold on to Justin Fields. So, they're not going to pay a premium to pry him away from the Bears. So, Ty, where do you want Justin Fields to go? Where do you think would be the most fun for him to end up at?
I'm going to change this on the fly.
Ooh, I like it.
My want is a team that has pretty much committed to not doing this, but I just want it to happen so bad because of other reasons,
Mhm.
I want him to go to Pittsburgh. Get Arthur Smith and Justin Fields. Good night. Good night. Like that is, I think that's one of the better offensive coordinator quarterback tandems then instantly. And I'll say this too. I understand Pittsburgh wanting to give Kenny Pickett another chance because it really feels like he hasn't really had the fairest of shots in his 2 years. That being said though, it doesn't really make Fields is an upgrade over Pickett. Why wouldn't you do that? And with his market so low, apparently
Yeah.
that was the big news from the first couple days, even before like the drill started at the combine.
Yeah.
The reports are saying that like Fields' market is like very, very dry and it's very,
Mhm.
very low. And it's like, if I'm the Steelers, why would I not just throw a third and just be
Yeah.
like, let's see what happens. If we get it, sweet, right? And then you have
Yeah.
a competition that between Kenny Pickett and Justin Fields. So again, that's a want. I don't think that'll happen because of also the things that we've heard that Pittsburgh is going to roll with Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, which
This is disgusting.
what a world that we are living in right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's Pittsburgh. That's where I want him to go.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the hard part for Fields, and I think this is where the teams are at, is have we he's been around for 3 seasons, and we haven't really seen him go, like, a side of him where, like, he could become a prolific passer.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't seen that yet going into year 4, and so that means you either have to tag him, you have to extend him, or you have to let him walk after this year. That I feel like that's where the market's so dry, is it's not because teams are like, "We don't wanna take a chance on Fields." It's because you have to make the decision like the second you get him on what you're doing moving forward. And if you tag it, or if you take his option, I think it's like 20, 28, $30 million that you're paying him next season. And
Yep.
if it's not working out, that's tough. I think I want him to go to the Falcons, and I actually think he will. That's where I have him. I think they're a team that's desperate, like you said. So I don't think they get Kirk Cousins, so I think they go out and get Justin Fields. That's my main reason, is I think they just need something there that's not Desmond Ridder.
Right.
So that's why I think he's going to be a Falcon. Ty, you told us that you want him on the Steelers. You don't think is going to happen. So where do you think he ends up?
Since I have Kirk going to Atlanta, I can't follow you and say that I think he goes to Atlanta because I think Kirk goes to Atlanta. And so I'm going to go a little bit out there. I'm going to go a little bit kind of reckless, I guess you could say. I'm going to say New England goes and gets Justin Fields. And I believe they have kind of fully accepted that they are in rebuild mode.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the harm in going on a 2-year experiment with Justin Fields to see if he can be your guy?
Yeah.
Clearly it's not going to be Mac Jones and it's not going to be Bailey Zappi. So go throw the low day 2 capital that it will take to go get Justin Fields and let him go for 2 seasons. Maybe he turns out to be your guy.
Yeah.
And guess what? Sweet. You got him for a third and you don't have to then use a first on a quarterback afterwards, right? So I think that's a very good idea. And especially then you can keep the number 3 pick.
Mm-hmm.
Take a Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah.
I think that's
just
kind of
saying.
I'm just saying New England is very much a dark horse at this point. And I will say this though. I think you and I both agree, and I think everyone else knows, at the very least, it's not Chicago. So it really
Yes.
could be anywhere else, but Chicago.
No, I 100% agree. And I like that prediction of the Patriots, because it feels like if they went out and got Fields, it would be, okay, we're making a start turn. This is no longer the Belichick era, right? We're doing something completely different. We're going out and getting the mobile quarterback. Obviously they had Cam Newton for the year, but that was more just because we couldn't find anybody else. Justin
Right.
Fields would be, okay, we're taking a new direction as a franchise. So I like that a lot. Other free agent quarterbacks we're not going to spend a lot of time on: Gardner Minshew, Jacoby Brissett, Joe Flacco, Jameis Winston, Ryan Tannehill, Sam Darnold, Josh Dobbs. Potentially, depending on what happens, Mac Jones and Sam Howell could be for trade. Otherwise, could be backups on their team. Ty, do any of the guys I just listed, from a fantasy perspective, would you go take a chance if you're in a super flex and you're desperate for quarterback? Would you take a chance on rostering, or maybe even making a low trade for any of these guys, or none of those names really interest you?
No, not really. I mean, I feel like most of these guys are either bridge guys or they are legitimate backup
Yeah.
quarterbacks. I mean, I look at Ryan Tannehill, like he might be the new Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Yeah.
Honestly, like that's just kind of what we're looking at, I think, with this group of players.
Yeah, I don't think I agree. I don't really think there's another guy who could go in and win a job,
No.
like
Mm-mm.
I think you'd have to have an injury for something to happen. I think that's kind of where these guys have cemented themselves at. Alrighty, let's transition to our running backs. We got quite a few of them that we want to talk about. 6 that we want to talk about for sure, and then we'll name a couple at the end. We're going to start with the biggest name on the market right now, Saquon Barkley. He is 27 years old. He's coming off 247 carries, 962 yards rushing, and 3.9 yards per carry, 6 rushing touchdowns, 41 receptions on 60 targets, 280 yards, and 4 touchdowns. The running back 13. If you were looking for a veteran running back at this point, Saquon would be the guy that you want, right? He's been that do it all guy his entire career. Obviously, this last year on the Giants, I gotta say, I feel like 3.9 yards per carry is really impressive on the team he was on. Because when Tommy Cutlets was playing quarterback, those teams weren't worried about them throwing the ball. They knew the ball was going to be run. They had 8 guys in the box literally the entire game. So, I don't see that 3.9 and go, oh man, he's fallen off. I see that as he had no shot this year.
Yeah.
Tyler, where do you want Saquon to go? Where, like, when you're envisioning like the perfect fantasy scenario for Saquon Barkley, where do you want him to end up?
With the Chargers. Getting him in a Jim Harbaugh offense that just wants to run the ball.
Mhm.
Yes, maybe that's a debate then of like, well, you have Justin Herbert. Are you really using him to, the potential that he has, if that makes sense? Like, I get that argument, but dude, Jim Harbaugh would love having a running back like Saquon Barkley. We literally just saw him just run Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards into the ground in Michigan because teams couldn't stop the run. And so that's where it starts with Jim Harbaugh and putting Saquon Barkley then behind a decent running offensive line. I think that's a fun one for me. I don't think it actually happens, but I think that's just a fun one.
Yeah, I mean, could you imagine? They have first round, they get Brock Bowers. Second round, you get AD Mitchell or something like that. Oh, you got play action to Saquon with Justin Herbert rolling out.
Man,
You got Brock Bowers over the middle, Mitchell
man.
running deep. I mean, that would be a fun offense.
I'm
Let me tell you.
I'm hot and bothered already.
You put that out there. I was like,
Wow.
oh, I really like that one. The team I picked was the Texans, and honestly, for a lot of the same reason similar reason is I think the Texans are going to have a really fun offense this year.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we saw it last year. You get Tank Dell, healthy. You give Nico Collins another year. Obviously, CJ Stroud looked awesome last year. And then, we saw Devin Singletary put up some pretty decent numbers for this team. He put Saquon back there. Saquon's, twice the running back Devin Singletary is. Not to slight Devin Singletary. It's just how good Saquon is. I mean, I think we could see a really, really fun year just from the offense in general, and Saquon. That is also my prediction as well. I think he is a Texan. I've seen some smoke coming up, in the news that the Texans and Saquon have been or Stroud and Saquon have been talking. Saquon is targeting the Texans. So I'm buying into that smoke. Ty, you said you don't think that he's going to be a Charger. So where do you think Saquon ends up?
I think it's Houston as well. I think Saquon's at the age where he recognizes the talent that he is. He also recognizes the market and knows that he doesn't really have a ton of time left to go cash in and go play in a much better, much more exciting offense than he had in New England. Because really from the get-go, like the dude was dealt just a horrible hand. I think Houston makes the most sense for Saquon in that sense then.
For sure. Alrighty. Well, let's go to our second running back. I think after Saquon, we could put these running backs in any order of, how good you think they are. We're going to talk about Josh Jacobs next. He's 26 years old, 13 games last year, 233 attempts, 805 yards on 3.5 yards per carry for 6 touchdowns, 37 receptions for 54 targets. Excuse me. I cannot speak right now. 296 yards and no receiving touchdowns. He was a running back 28. honestly, it kind of felt like he came back a little more, down to earth because he had that great season last year. This kind of felt like a little more of a return to normalcy. I still think he's a good running back. Don't get me wrong. Like I'm not saying he's bad, but I don't know if we're going to see another top 5 season from Jacobs, although it will depend on where he ends up. I want him in Dallas, Ty. I
Oh,
know you have a soft spot in your heart for Mr. Tony Pollard, but I think Tony's time is done in Dallas. I think they want to. Jerry Jones is always the guy to want to go make a splash. I think he's going to want Saquon. I don't think it's going to happen with Saquon, so I think Josh Jacobs is going to be their consolation prize. Or that's kind of the way I'm leaving. I guess I just told you my prediction too. So I want and believe he will be a Dallas Cowboys. So Ty, I'll let you just do it however you want. What do you want? Where do you want Josh Jacobs? Where do you think he'll end up?
yeah. My prediction and my want are also the same, just with a different team, and it's still Vegas. I don't think there's really anything to it other than I just don't think Vegas would be smart to just let Josh Jacobs walk, if that makes sense, because they really have no one else. Well, like we saw Zamir White have, a pretty decent finish to the season in Josh Jacobs' place.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we can fully rely on a Zamir White. And then you look at the draft and it's like, is there really anyone there like a Bucky Irving maybe that could pair up with Zamir White? And I'm like, does that really make a whole lot of sense for Vegas to go into the future with Antonio Pierce and Luke Getsy as their offensive coordinator with Bucky Irving and Zamir White as their backfield? It's like, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So I think Vegas should do whatever they can. 2-year deal, 30 million, make it like 24 guaranteed or something. Like give him the money that he wants and just, write it out as much as you can, because we've talked about him on previous episodes. We talked about him last week in our Dynasty Buys and Sells with our friend with our friend Jagger from Football Guys. That was an excellent episode. You should
I know.
go.
I was sad I missed it. I listened back to it. It was a fun episode to listen to.
It was a lot of fun. But like he's got a lot of tread on his tires. So Vegas just, make sure that he stays in-house, because I don't think the pasture is going to be greener on the other side.
Yeah, I agree. I think Zamir White did enough where they are at least thinking about moving off from him. That's why I could see them getting another guy in the draft, signing, one of these later veterans. And I also have Zamir White on my dynasty team, so I do get it.
That's where it's rooted in.
No, I truly do think that he did enough. That they're going to at least consider, okay, what does life without Josh Jacobs really look like? All right, number 3, and I think, this has been an intriguing name since last season, is Derrick Henry. He's 30 years old, and yet he still put up 280 carries for 1,162 yards and 4.2 yards per carry with 12 rushing touchdowns, 28 receptions, 36 targets, another 214 yards. I mean, this dude's putting up almost 1,400 all-purpose yards this last season and over 300 touches, and he is 30 years old, right? We talk about that running back cliff at age 28, and it's just like, is Derrick Henry really going to actually ever hit that, or is he just going to kind of Adrian Peterson his way out of here, where you're like, he's not quite what he was, but he still put up 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. So I don't know what to do with him. Tyler, I'll let you talk about the want, because we both have the same team. So why don't you take it away? Why do we both want Derrick Henry in Baltimore?
Who doesn't?
Yeah.
I mean, like, that's essentially what it comes down to. Like, putting Derrick Henry in this Baltimore offense would be kind of a match made in heaven, honestly. Like, that offense, maybe, I don't think we could say that they are then a complete offense, but they've never really had, like, they are always a ground and pound team. They will always try to beat you with a run. You then have like 2 of the biggest threats then in the run game with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry.
Mm-hmm.
Like, dude, I'm just picturing they didn't do it a whole lot this past year, but just I'm in my Madden brain, I'm just going QB option with Lamar and Derrick Henry. Like, good luck defense. Good luck. Just try to stop that. So,
oh, I know. And that's what he's talking about, Madden brain. You think Keaton Mitchell coming back then? They go that triple option.
Stop it with
Henry
this
up the
fantasy
middle.
team.
Oh man. Hey, Keaton Mitchell's fun. Like, if Derrick Henry's there, Derrick Henry's the running back. Don't get me wrong, but I think Keaton Mitchell, as a speedster, is fun.
Yeah, so then you would also say then, play action hitting Rashad Bateman over the
Yes,
top then is
100%. I got rid of Bateman. I cut bait on that. But I agree with all that, and I want him there. And Tyler, that is your prediction. My problem with it is the Ravens are always the team where we're like, man, if they sign this veteran running back, it could be so much, and they don't ever. So I have no faith that this is the year they're going to pull the trigger on it. I think Derrick Henry ends up on the Eagles. I think
oh man.
I think they're a team that, they like Howie Roseman liked his LeGarrette Blount, I think going to get these older guys, especially if they're looking to ban the tush push. I think getting
Which
a
it
big,
doesn't sound like it's gonna happen, but you
maybe
never
not,
know. You never
but
know.
I think getting a big guy around the goal line too, that's what I think. He goes to the Eagles, but obviously I think Derrick Henry is going to end up going really where he wants to go this year. It is just depend on how much money he wants, to take.
Mhm.
Alrighty, next we got your guy, Mr. Tony
Yes.
Pollard.
Yes.
He is also 26 years old. I shouldn't say also. We are just talking about Derrick Henry. He is 26 years old. Last season was his first full season as kind of the workhorse back. So he's had 252 carries, only 1,000 rushing yards, 4 yards per carry, 6 touchdowns. He did have 55 receptions on 67 targets for 311 yards. He was a running back 14. I think it's going to be a mixed bag for Tony Pollard, right? He kind of feels like that guy that's almost going to be dependent on where everyone else goes. You know what I mean? Like where they're going to, like, teams are going to wait on for Saquon, Josh Jacobs, probably Derrick Henry to kind of figure out where they want to go, and then Tony Pollard's going to kind of fit in there. But Ty, if you could pick anywhere for Tony Pollard to end up this year, where would it be?
I think it's similar to how you view Saquon in Houston.
Mm.
And like maybe the talent level between Saquon and Tony Pollard is not the same. But it's the idea of like get this guy in an explosive offense because like not to say that like Dallas's offense was not explosive or anything like that, but it's like I think Tony Pollard could benefit from
Change of scenery.
yeah. Yeah, honestly, I think that's really what it comes down to. And I think there's a need then in Houston, and probably here's the other thing. Tony Pollard is not going to cost as much as Saquon Barkley is. So like if you're looking for like a, cost effective or more efficient running back from a monetary perspective, Tony Pollard is a fine option if you strike out on a Saquon Barkley or a Josh Jacobs or someone like that.
Yeah, no, and I think there's some truth to Pollard last year too, talking about feeling better after coming back from the injury, taking a couple weeks into the season. I think we'll see that he's better than what we saw last year. I would love to see him on the Eagles, just because we've seen it with Miles Sanders, DeAndre Swift these last 2 years, guys who have been really really good. And then like we saw Miles Sanders go to Carolina and he was not good anymore. I just think putting him in a situation to excel would be a lot of fun to watch for Tony Pollard.
Mm-hmm.
But I did just bring up Miles Sanders. I think he goes to Carolina. I think Carolina. And the reason is I think they're going to cut bait on Miles Sanders and they're going to try it all over again because I don't trust the ownership in Carolina.
No.
I think they're going to pay the bad team tax for Tony Pollard. I do only think it's going to be a 1-year deal, though. I think it's going to be, he comes in, kind of gets his bag, kind of tries to show, hey, I still got it, and then, go out and get a contract again next year.
I think Tony Pollard goes back to Dallas, and I think Dallas then uses a third or a fourth on another running back, preferably one of the bigger backs in this draft. Trey Benson, your Florida State guy, Trey Benson,
I like it.
Would be great in a partnership with Tony Pollard. I think Braylon Allen, who is purely just downhill and all that kind of stuff.
Allen with him.
Yeah, like I think Dallas could find a nice counterpart because I think that's the lesson that we learned last year with Tony is that he's not really cut out to be the main back in an offense. Maybe he could be the most efficient, and maybe it is a 50-50 split in the backfield. But I think it comes down to if he goes back to Dallas, Dallas is then most definitely finding another running back to put alongside Tony Pollard then.
Yeah, definitely. Alrighty, next we got Austin Eckler. He is 28 years old, and I think we did see him hit that cliff last year. He did not look quite like Austin Eckler. I'm not saying that he's done, but I don't, I think the 2020, 2021 Austin Eckler isn't quite there anymore. He still did have 179 rush attempts in 14 games, 628 yards, 3.5 yards per carry for 5 tutties, another 51 receptions on 74 targets for 436 yards and a touchdown. He was a running back 26. Obviously, if you drafted him as running back 2, you were disappointed.
Mhm.
But I think despite me wanting him to stay as a Charger, I think, I would like to see, I just think him and Herbert work well together. I think his time being a Charger is done. So my want is kind of out of the question. Ty, where do you want Austin Eckler to end up at?
Kansas City Chiefs.
The
And
next Jarek McKinnon.
I mean, here's the thing. I think it makes a ton of sense though. Like, sure, he may not get the money that he wants, but
Mhm.
he's then going to arguably the best team in football. I mean, the team that literally just won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
You get Patrick Mahomes as your quarterback. You get an offensive mind like Andy Reid, and you can stick it to the Chargers because the Chargers didn't pay you the money that you wanted when you were there. So you get to play
Mhm.
them twice every year. You get to kind of bully them in those matchups because you've got the extra motivation then. So like that's my want. Like if he goes to the Chiefs, like, oh man. And think about it this too. Him and Isaiah Pacheco as a partnership.
Mm.
Oh, that is that's a dream. That's a dream.
I do like that because he doesn't have to put up, he doesn't have to touch the ball 300 times,
Right.
250 times. Like he could touch the ball 130 times next year and be very productive from
Yeah.
both an NFL and probably fantasy, perspective of you're getting receptions on that Chiefs team. Those are valuable. So
Mhm.
I think that's definitely something keep in mind. I think he is going to go to the Giants
Mhm.
because I think the Giants will give him some money. And I think that's really all he wants right now is money. I think he feels like he has not been paid what he has been worth his entire career. So I think he's going to chase the biggest bag, and I think that's going to be in New York with Saquon leaving.
I It's kind of along that theme of like just going and getting the bag. Carolina. Carolina is gonna pay the bad team tax. They're just gonna want to go get football guys. That was pretty evident from Dan Morgan in his press conference that he just stared your soul every single second. Like I think Austin Eckler would be a fit for the kind of player that they want. He could be a leader then in their locker room, and they'll just pay up. They'll pay up, and Austin Eckler would be like, "Yeah, yes, please, I'll take that."
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that's kind of the same way I'm viewing Tony Pollard right now. So, I definitely don't hate that spot at all. Last guy we'll talk about in depth is DeAndre Swift. He's actually the youngest running back we're going to talk about right now at 25 years old. Last season on the Eagles, 229 attempts, 1,049 yards, 4.6 yards per carry, 5 touchdowns, 39 receptions on 49 targets for 214 receiving yards and another touchdown. The running back 20. I feel like his season felt like, man, this should, fantasy wise, should have been a lot better than it was. Um, but I also think that right now, if we're looking at DeAndre Swift, I feel like teams are going to have a lot of the same, a lot of worries now after what Miles Sanders just did. Miles Sanders had 1,200 rushing yards, 12 rushing touchdowns, and then went to Carolina and started 4 games and then was done as the starter. Um, but yeah, Ty, where do you want DeAndre Swift to go?
I want him to go back to Philly. And I think that's just for continuity reasons. And
Mhm,
just, I mean, Swift looked like a completely different back than he did in Detroit. And I think it was fun to see for a little bit.
mhm.
Obviously, it stinks then because he's then going back to a tush push offense and that his red zone upside is then pretty capped. But I just think, again, for continuity reasons, I think I would want him back in Philly. And and that's where he's from too. So it's kind of like stay home, buddy.
Alrighty. Yeah, no, I wouldn't hate that. I think he's going to go to a division rival. I
Oh,
want him to go to a division rival. I want him to go to the Commanders. I don't think
Oh,
Brad Robinson is going to be a receiving threat again this year. And Antonio Gibson is also a free agent. So
makes sense.
I think that he could, have a decent enough role there. I don't think Brian Robinson is good enough to really, be a target hog. But yeah, so I would like to see him in Washington. Ty, where do you think he's going to go?
I think he's going to go to the Chicago Bears.
Okay, they were my second option, so I like that.
And I think Chicago is going to go under the radar a bit in the running back market because, they did draft Roschon Johnson. They still have Khalil Herbert, and both of them served pretty well last year. I just think getting DeAndre Swift, who's relatively misused throughout his career, like I think Chicago is a great spot for him to kind of, get the work that he wants, get the contract that he could probably get in an offense with a Caleb Williams and DJ Moore with a better offensive line. Obviously, he's coming from Philly where they have one of the best, but still, like, I think Chicago is kind of a sneaky spot for a running back, and I think Swift would make a lot of sense there.
Yeah, for sure. Alrighty, real quick before we hear from our sponsors, other running backs, Zach Moss, J.K. Dobbins, Devin Singletary, Antonio Gibson, Alexander Madison are all going to be free agents. Any of those guys really, spark your interest?
I think running back is the one position where landing spot matters. Like Zach Moss in Indy, because he was traded there, made a ton of sense last year because of JT's holdout and all that kind of stuff. Singletary, we were in on because we're like, okay, people don't rate him, but he's going to an offense in Houston that they will utilize him.
Yeah.
So it really comes down to like landing spots. Like I was thinking about this the other day. Like I'm not going to have any shares of J.K. Dobbins because I think he goes to the Jets. Like that's an Aaron Rodgers signing. They're just like, you should bring in J.K. Dobbins. They're like, all right, here's $5 million. Like that's that kind of signing. So it really depends on landing spot. But if I had to choose one from the 5, I'm not gonna lie. I think it's Zach Moss.
Yeah. I think he showed enough last year that he, if he finds the right spot, he could be pretty interesting. Alrighty. Well, let's hear. We're going to take a quick break, hear from our friends over at Underdog, and then we're going to come back with wide receivers, tight ends, and the non-fantasy guys in a rapid fire to end out the episode.
Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100.
And we're back. And Ty, we just found out that Russell Wilson has been officially released, but we should have known that and had him on our list originally. So let's spend 3 minutes quickly talking about Mr. Russell Wilson.
Mr. Unlimited.
He was a quarterback 12 last year, surprisingly. So I mean,
by virtue of just playing literally every single game.
Exactly. But obviously it wasn't very good because the Broncos are cutting him and eating, I want to say, close to $80 million in dead cap or something ridiculous like that over the next couple of years. It's just
let me look this up because it's not something that a team will kindly swallow.
No, this is like once a decade. Maybe you get a dead cap like this for a team.
Well, it only happens when you have new owners that are honestly like the richest owners in the league.
Yep. And the other thing too is it kind of comes down to they traded for Sean Payton, right? They spent a lot on him and it didn't pan out, so they got to blame someone, and they're not blaming the coach.
Right. Yeah.
Did you get that cap number?
So there's 37 million. Doing math.
Technical difficulty.
It's a lot. It's more than it should be.
Yeah, that's I mean, that's wild. And so, Ty, with that, he is a free agent now. Where do you think he goes? And where do you want him to go?
Vegas, 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 Vegas. I think that makes a ton of sense because I think Vegas is going to be in a spot where if they draft a quarterback, they're going to need to develop the quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Give Russ a 1 year, $10 million deal or whatever it is because he is a quarterback. And I think a lot of people will hear that and go, "Oh, that's an overpay." Sorry, dude plays quarterback. Like that's just how it is. Get him to Vegas, and then the revenge games and stuff like that. But I think Vegas could be a spot where he is then also kind of built back up a little bit because he was just so he was torn apart so much in Denver. So I think it's Vegas, and I think it's pretty straightforward if I'm honest.
So here it is from Tom Pelissero. He's getting paid $39 million in cash this year, $35.4 million cap hit this year. Next year, $49.6 million cap hit. They are paying him. Their cap hit over the next 2 years is $84.5 million for him to not play on the team. That is how much they wanted him gone. Is that they were willing to eat $84.5 million for him to not play on their team. That is insanity. But yeah, I agree. I would love to see him on Vegas. I would love to see that revenge game. It would probably be a disgusting revenge game that they put on like a Thursday Night Football or something that we'd be like, oh, there was 19 turnovers in this game, but could definitely see it.
Jonathan Jones, who's the lead insider on CBS. Mm-hmm. Russell Wilson had 2 years left on his deal when he signed the 5-year extension with the Broncos. And that extension was 5 years, $245 million. And he won't be a Bronco for any of those 5 years.
That is awesome.
That is.
That's crazy.
Ben Solak on Twitter. He's a great follow for all things football. If anyone would like to pay me $85 million to not do any work for them at all, please hit my inbox.
Yeah, that is, I mean, that's just wild amount of money.
Crazy.
Wild. Alrighty. Speaking of wild amount of money, we talked about Mike Evans earlier and these wide receivers. We'll kick off with Mike Evans. Right. I wanted him to be a Buck. Ty, you said you wanted to be a Chief, but ultimately 2-year, $52 million deal for the Bucks. Are you upset about that at all, or how do you feel about that one?
It's fully earned, and I think a lot of people, the speculation for other teams, even though there was a market for him, I think it purely came down to just the fact that people were bored of talking about him going back to Tampa.
Yeah, and they made it work. Obviously the salary cap increasing this year, I think helped that a lot. Yes. It just gives them that extra space to play with. But good for Mike Evans. T. Higgins. Last season, 42 receptions on 76 targets, 656 yards and 5 touchdowns in 12 games. Wide receiver 51, wide receiver 42 in points per game. He was tagged by the Bengals. Obviously, we know that just because someone's franchise tag, that doesn't mean everything works out, exactly how they intend. So we can keep that speculation. Right now, both of us are predicting he's a Bengal. But let's say he decides, I'm not playing on this franchise tag. You either trade me or I'm sitting out. Where would you want him to go?
Listeners of the show will know that I have been pounding the table for Houston to go trade for T. Higgins. And I really don't feel the need to explain it any more than just the fact of CJ Stroud getting a weapon like T. Higgins and an opportunity for Higgins to be the wide receiver 1 in his offense. It just makes so much sense, and I want to happen so bad, but that's just not how it works, and it's just not going to happen.
I'd like to see him on Kansas City. I'd like to see Patrick Mahomes get him. I know it's that's what everyone said. I would like it. I don't think it's going to happen. I think he's still a Bengal. But let's move on to the next guy who's probably going to get franchise tag is Mr. Michael Pittman. 109 receptions on 156 yards. 156 targets, 1,152 yards, 4 touchdowns, wide receiver 13 this last year, which is good. Wide receiver 16 points per game. It sounds like, from what I've heard, is he's probably going to be franchise tagged. Is that what you're hearing as well?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So both of our predictions are the Colts. Is that where you would want him to end up, or where are you thinking for Michael Pittman?
I'd want him to go back to Indy. I think Pittman, he's kind of on that fringe, like could be wide receiver 1, your wide receiver 2. Like, I don't really see him ever becoming like a true alpha wide receiver, but I think the way that Indy used him this past year, I think is very, very intriguing moving forward. When Anthony Richardson's playing at 100%, I really don't think it gets better than how he has it right now in Indy anywhere else.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. If he were to move on, I'd like to see him on Arizona. Just because I think they're going to take probably Marvin Harrison, but if not, Malik Neighbors in this draft. And then you just add another wide receiver. I think Kyler is still a very good quarterback.
Mhm.
And so to give him those two weapons, you got Trey McBride. If they bring back James Conner, who's shown, I think people have really knocked James Conner just because of the injuries earlier in his career.
Yeah.
But he's dealt with injuries every year, but he's a solid running back when he's out there. I think this could be a sneaky fun offense down in Arizona if they added a guy like Michael Pittman. Not saying they will, but I think it'd be interesting. Alrighty, moving on. These next two guys are really the only two that I feel like really have a chance to move off of their team. We'll start with Calvin Ridley. And, he still feels like a wild card, right? We saw him last year, and for the most part, it wasn't that great, right? It wasn't like, oh, yes. But he did show flashes where every once in a while, like, ooh, that might be the old Calvin Ridley right there. 76 receptions on 136 targets. That's crazy to me. I mean, that's he's almost down to like a 50% catch. 1,016 yards, 8 touchdowns, wide receiver 18, wide receiver 28 in points per game. Tyler, if you could have Calvin Ridley go anywhere this next year, where do you want him in? Oh, caught a mid-yawn.
Yeah, sorry.
Mid-yawn right there. We're born, Ty.
Sorry. I kind of want Denver, because I think Denver is a spot where he could go in and truly be the number one without major competition anywhere else. Like, Cortland Sutton's still there, but meh, you know what I'm saying. I think Calvin Ridley, as the route runner that he is, I think Sean Payton could get real creative with him. I kind of like Denver as the want, but Denver is just caught in this purgatory right now with the Russ thing and all that kind of stuff. I don't really know if it's actually going to work out. I think it makes sense, though, in terms of a partnership.
So you want him to go there. Would that be assuming Jeudy is gone?
Yes.
And are you under that assumption that he's going to be gone this year? Because I kind of feel like I am.
Yeah. I think Judy's gone.
All right. Well, we'll keep talking about that. I want you to rack your brain, and we'll come back to it. And I want you to tell me where you think Jeudy goes or where you want him to go. I want him to be a Bear. I want him to play across DJ Moore. Obviously, they could take someone in the. This would be assuming they don't take someone in the draft, but I don't think he's going to be a Bear. I think a lot, like I said with Austin Ekeler, he's going to be a Giant because I think he's going to go try to get the biggest bag possible. And I think the Giants are one of those teams that's got to pay the bad team tax, go get a wide receiver. Because let's be honest, what they rolled out last year at the wide receiver position wasn't it. What they rolled out the last year at the wide receiver position was abysmal. It was hard to watch. And there just wasn't a lot out there for Daniel Jones or whoever was playing quarterback. Tyler, and it's looking like you might be thinking on a similar wavelength to me of where you think Calvin Ridley ends up.
New York Giants. And I think it's kind of similar to the Broncos in the sense that, like, they just need a guy who can just get open.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is kind of a perfect opportunity then for Calvin Ridley.
Alrighty, we will come back to Jerry Jeudy later, but let's talk about our fifth guy real quick, Marquise Brown. I guess he's really the third guy we've talked about in depth because our first two guys were franchise tag while we were making this podcast doc. So, just ruining our plan. But Marquise Brown last year, 51 receptions, 101 targets, 574 yards, and 4 tutties. He's wide receiver 52 in points per game. For me, I do not view him as a guy that's going to go in to be a wide receiver 1 somewhere. At least an effective wide receiver 1. I do think, and you'll see it from the team I predict him to go to, I do think he's going to go in and be the wide receiver 1. I just don't know if he should be. So that's why I want him to go to Las Vegas. I want him to be opposite Devontae Adams. I want him to be a little more of that field stretcher again, like we saw back in Baltimore. I think that he can do that on that team. Having him, Jacoby Myers, and Devontae Adams. And then hopefully, Michael Mayer takes a step forward, and then they add Russell Wilson. It could be a decent enough offense right under Antonio Pierce. So it would be an interesting mix. Ty, where do you want Marquise Brown?
I kind of want him to go to Tennessee just to give Will Levis another weapon. Like I'm
Give him something.
Right. Like I expect DeAndre Hopkins to be there, but DeAndre Hopkins is on the wrong side of 31. And I think the ball has got to move somehow in that offense. So getting a guy like Marquise Brown at least is another option then. And like, what are we now? 2 years removed from Treylon Burks' draft.
Yeah.
I think jury is still out there. Yeah, I think he's more of a 3 guy than he is a 1 or a 2 guy.
For sure. I think he's going to end up in Carolina. I think it's similar to like that Christian Kirk signing. I don't think it's going to work out as well as it did for them of like, hey, here's a wide receiver 2 that we're going to pay more money to just because we need something that's not, Adam Thielen breaking down halfway through the year, DJ Chark or Jonathan Mingo who can't get open. So I think that's where he goes. But obviously, I think Marquise Brown's a pretty big dark horse for where he can end up.
Yeah, I like him going to New England. Even if they don't get him Malik Neighbors or Marvin Harrison, I think getting him in the offense is just at least something for whoever their quarterback is. And I like like Justin Fields. We talked about that one earlier. Like just getting some kind of quality wide receiver, even if you don't think he's a wide receiver 1, just getting to a spot like New England gives a quarterback a shot in that spot.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Jerry Jeudy, we brought it up. Where would you like to see Jerry Jeudy end up this year?
I think he's just going to be. So I have to throw in the disclaimer. I think he's going to be very, very hard to move because he does. I mean, he's playing on his 5th year option this year, and it's a lot.
Yeah.
So I think it is going to be a lot, and he's protected in some ways. So like, I don't. Maybe the real answer is just that he isn't going to be moved, and that he is just kind of put into that wide receiver 3 role because. Again, I don't really see. I don't really see a team trading.
Willing.
Right? Yeah, like that's quite a bit to bring on for a guy that really has improved a whole lot. Which, again, like that's crazy how much things can change in a year. Because going into last year, everyone was like, "Wow, Jerry Jeudy actually could take a step forward." Like, and Sean Payton coming in, like it's gonna be great, and then it didn't, and then it wasn't. So I think options are limited in places that he can go. And I think I think he's just going to fall down the depth chart in that.
Yeah. They'd have to really because he'll be a $13 million cap hit if they trade him to the team that takes him.
Yeah.
That's a lot to take on for a guy, like a contender is not going to go and pay $13 million for Jeudy. So really the only way it looks like he leaves is if he's cut pre-June 1st.
I don't even think, but can you even do that though? I mean,
they can cut him still because they picked it up, but they'd have to pay $13 million on. They'd have to pay him out the entire thing. So he'd get paid no matter what. So that would be the only way. I think there's a lot of teams that'd be fun for him to end up on. Right? I think he's a guy that has a lot of upside. But it will be interesting to kind of see what happens with him this year because obviously they're already taking on $35 million in dead cap from Russ. So to take on another 13 from Jeudy would be tough pill to swallow. All right. We got a couple more wide receivers: Darnell Mooney, Gabe Davis, Curtis Samuel, Odell Beckham, and Tyler Boyd. Any of those guys you think could end up in an exciting spot and maybe be relevant for fantasy this season?
A pretty popular report or link is Darnell Mooney to the Chiefs.
Really?
That's an interesting one.
That would be interesting.
I mean, Darnell Mooney has had flashes in the past.
He's not a bad receiver. I think this year it was just like injuries, and these last 2 years he really hasn't been able to get going. But he's a decent enough receiver.
I'm just saying, if Kansas City somehow finds a way to get AD Mitchell in the draft, and then they also get Darnell Mooney in free agency, that means that your top 3 wide receivers then go AD Mitchell, Rasheed Rice, and Darnell Mooney.
That'd be fun.
That's pretty solid.
Yeah, let me just say too, if Gabe Davis ends up on another team, I'm not falling into that trap because let's be honest, he already had maybe the best deep ball thrower in the entire NFL.
Yep.
He couldn't put it together for a whole season.
Yep.
So I'm staying away from that. Tyler Boyd could be interesting from an NFL perspective. I feel like more the fantasy, right? I don't think he's going to end up, cracking the top 36, but I think he could go somewhere that needs a veteran, kind of Brandon Cooks-ish almost from, just kind of fill a role. All right, let's go into tight ends. There's really only one worth talking about. Dalton Schultz, I think. This last season, 59 receptions, 88 targets, 635 yards, 5 touchdowns. He was a tight end 10 and tight end 11 points per game. And you know what? I think we can keep this one short and sweet, Ty, because we have the same thing for all of this, and that's the Texans. Oh, you're changing it on me now that I say that. You heard me say it. I want him back on the Texans. I think he ends up back there after the season he just had. You think he ends up on the Texans, but where would you really like to see him go?
I would just love to see it happen. I don't think it happens because of their cap situation, but if Miami were to go get Dalton Schultz, it's just another weapon for Tua. High in a pretty explosive offense. I think that would be fun to see. That would be fun to see. And for fantasy, that would be great. But I think it'll ultimately be Dalton Schultz back in Houston.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree with that. The other tight ends who are free agents this year, Noah Fant, Hunter Henry, Mike Gesicki, and Gerald Everett. Could any of those guys find a spot that would maybe, get you back in on them? I don't think so either. I think they're all kind of that lower tier.
Yeah, I think it's not even to a spot where they are like intriguing. I think it's just one of those, like, they're going to sign somewhere and you're going to look at them and just be like, all right, like they are there. Like they can't go anywhere else where it moves the needle in favor of them.
For sure. Alrighty, let's quickly do a rapid fire round of some non-fantasy players. They're actually all defensive players. There's really not an offensive lineman who's super. Tyron Smith, maybe we could have thrown in there. But he's 33. Yep, exactly. So we have 9 defensive players. We'll do a rapid fire. We'll just tell you the team that we think they end up on. And then maybe a sentence or two about it. Starting with Chris Jones. I think he's back on the Chiefs. Ty, do you think any different with him?
Nope, I think so as well.
Yeah, I think that has to be a priority for them, especially if they want to three-peat. Josh Allen, not the quarterback for you Bills fans. Don't freak out. The defensive end who had 17.5 sacks this last year. I think he's going to be a Texan. I think he'd be really fun opposite of Will Anderson. Ty, where do you think Josh Allen ends up?
I was saying this to you before we started talking. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense for Jacksonville to go sign one of these other edge rushers like a Danielle Hunter when they literally have a younger guy that is literally like the Jaguars need to go just re-sign Josh Allen. They need to. They have to. Like, you can't. It makes zero sense. But now that I think about it, with Trent Baalke as their GM, it makes complete sense to just go out and sign a different edge rusher when you literally had one in your backyard. No, but again, like that, the logic doesn't make sense to me to go spend on a different edge rusher when you've literally got the guy in your building already.
No, I don't hate that. Next we got Christian Wilkins. He just came out. Miami's not going to franchise tag him. He's going to be walking. Where do you think Christian Wilkins ends up?
I love Wilkins in Houston. And I think a staple of a staple of DeMeco Ryan's defenses is solid defensive line play. Mm-hmm. You saw them go out and get Will Anderson Jr. last year. I think the next step is going and getting a dominant defensive tackle, and doing that with Christian Wilkins just checks that box in so many ways.
Yeah, I think it's similar to me thinking Josh Allen goes there, right? I think it's just they're going to go. We both believe that Houston's going to be in the hunt for a dominant defensive lineman. I am going to the Commanders on just they've got a lot of cap room. They need something going on that defensive line now. Maybe they don't, because now that I'm thinking about it, right, they just got rid of their 2 edge rushers last year, so maybe they stay away from it. But at the same time, I think they got a lot of money to spend, so bringing him in on a couple-year deal. I think is within the realm of possibilities. Next, we got edge rusher Brian Burns. I think he ends up being a Patriot. I think, New England, again, has a lot of cap space. I think Gerard Mayo, being a defensive guy, is going to want to kind of, bulk up that defense. So I think he's a Patriot. Ty, where do you think Brian Burns goes this year? Because, again, just like Christian Wilkins, it pretty much sounds like Carolina has, turned off negotiations. So he is walking away from Carolina.
I think, as I'm just kind of refreshing my memory on cap spaces and stuff, I like the Rams. Man. They pushed to get him a couple of years ago at the deadline, and David Tepper absolutely fumbled the bag and declined the offer, and now they can probably go out and sign him. They do have about $36 million in cap space, so I think there's a way that they could bring in Brian Burns and really take another step on that defense.
Yeah, I like that. All right, next we got a corner, L'Jarius Sneed, moving away from these defensive linemen. He was franchise tagged, but it sounds like the Chiefs are allowing him to explore a trade. I think that he ends up in Indianapolis. I think that he's going to be a Colt. Colt's got about $70 million in cap space. Their secondary hasn't been great for a little while, so I adding him back, I think could be big for them. Where do you think L'Jarius Sneed goes?
I think Detroit they pay up and they say, hey, we need a shutdown corner, and they go on and pay whatever Kansas City wants. They've got the cap space to sign him to an extension. So I hate it because as a Vikings fan, that would really, really suck. But
yeah,
it makes a ton of sense for Detroit, I think.
No, and he does feel like a Dan Campbell player, right? I mean, he, hard nosed. He's going to take some penalties, but he's also going to be, crazy, uber aggressive. So he does feel like the Dan Campbell type guy. Next, we got Justin Madubuike. I think he ends up in Tennessee. Kind of the same as, the Commanders, just adding something to that defensive line. And just lots of cap room. Do you think he leaves Baltimore, Ty, or what are you thinking for him?
I think he goes back to Baltimore. I think Baltimore can make some things happen. They only have about $8 million in cap space. That's not going to be enough to bring him back straight up. So they're going to restructure some guys. But I don't think it's smart for Baltimore. Like they did something similar to Michael Pierce when they let him walk, but I don't think Madubuike is on the same career trajectory as Michael Pierce was when they let him walk.
For sure. And then we got 3 left. Antonio Winfield. I'm going to be honest. I'm just going to say mine. Antoine Winfield. Sorry.
Wow.
Junior.
Antonio.
I know. You know what? I don't even care. Like, as a Vikings fan, that really hurts me that I just screwed that up. I'm going to be honest. I was just so excited.
You were so excited to talk about him.
I was. I'm so glad you corrected me on it because I would have sounded like an absolute idiot if I said it one more time. Antoine Winfield Jr. Wow, that was brutal. We need to cut that. I want him to be a Viking. I want him to follow in his dad's footsteps and be a Viking. So I have him as the Vikings. Ty, you're a little more realistic with your pick. Where do you got him?
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a very homer take of you, but
it was.
I also think he goes back to Tampa. It sounds like it's a lot to bring back Evans and Baker and Winfield. There's got to be a way that they can do it, though, and I think they'll find that way.
I do too. Alrighty, Danielle Hunter, one of the guys that's near and dear to our heart. Ty, what do you think happens with Danielle Hunter?
I sent you one way, and I'm going to go another way. I think he signs with the Washington Commanders.
All right.
That's just a money thing. Mm-hmm. That's all that it comes down to. He's going to get offered a ton of money to go to Washington. They have a need. I think it makes sense.
Yeah. I think he goes to Arizona. I think they could be, a team in the mix, right? They've done it in the past. Obviously, it's a new regime there, but with like a JJ Watt. But I think they try to bring him in and try to add something to that defense. And then our last guy, I'll keep it simple for us. Jalen Johnson. We both have him going back to Chicago. Anything you want to add to that one?
No, I think he does have a market out there, but I don't think Chicago is going to really let him get to that point. They're going to re-sign him to a lot of money.
Yeah, as they should, right? If you're building that defense, he's a good player to build around. Alrighty, that does it for our free agent predictions. We went through a lot of players right now, so thank you for hanging in there with us. Tyler, anything you want to add to the people as we get ready for this free agent time?
Oh, hey, here's a reminder. Here's a lesson to be learned. Do
Alrighty.
not pay attention, or do not care a lot about the initial number that they show you. Look at the guarantee number. Look at the guarantee number. Again, Mike Evans today, 2-year, $52 million extension. You're like, wow, that's a lot of money. He's only guaranteed $35 million. So it's essentially a 2-year, $18 million contract per year. That's a lot more reasonable. Look at the guarantee number, not at the big number that you see right away.
Definitely. Alrighty, with that, thank you for joining us. We don't have any more YouTube long form coming out this week. Next week we'll be back with some more. Back with the pod. We got shorts coming out all week long, so make sure you're subscribed, hit those notifications. But yeah, we will see you next week. So deuces.